Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines, where we look at food and conflict in those areas where they intersect. I'm Jess, as always. With me is Max.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're going to finish out our Haiti series, and we're going to look at rice. Rice brought us into this whole topic because of, recent articles talking about arsenic levels in rice that was being imported from the U.S., which we were like, that's crazy. And I was kind of like, why is the U.S. importing rice to an area that is very heavily dependent on rice for their diet? And it kind of took us down this trip on learning about Haiti, the insanity of what is Haiti today, and it's been interesting. But we've learned a lot of food history along the way too. So we're going to summarize some of that today, and then end with the side of rice.
I think it was pretty funny because when we first started the Haiti episodes, we were like, all right, yeah, we'll do a quick history on Haiti and then talk about, how they got the rice. And we were like, oh, 4 episodes later. Okay, we're trying to make everything as succinct as possible, but oh my goodness, there's just too much that we wanted to cover and not do an injustice to, but not dive too deep into. So here we are, our fourth episode and final episode on Haiti. I hope everybody's enjoyed the past 3 episodes, but if not, and if this is your first time listening, this episode is kind of a standalone. The last 3 will really help you understand the time periods that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But our goal is for you to be able to follow along without necessarily needing to listen to those 3 as well.
Or being too where am I talking about now?
Yeah. We're just going to be talking to about some time periods that we discussed in the previous episodes and referring to them by those names, like the Duvalier era or the post-revolution era and stuff like that, which will make more sense if you had listened to those, but you should be all right.
Yeah, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start with, the colonization of the island of Hispaniola. So similar to other areas of Latin America, the island of Hispaniola, where Haiti consists of the left side of that island, was colonized by European powers. Initially, it's the French, and then later the British will go on to own it. Haiti was previously known as Saint Domingue and was made into an export economy, which means that the entire basis of life on that island was dedicated to producing something in the island and shipping it off somewhere else.
Yeah.
And they're mostly agricultural products. The most lucrative crops being sugar, coffee, cotton, and then they also become leading producers of indigo, like to make the dye, the color blue, and cacao, the bean for chocolate, which I love to teach in my class that chocolate is, a native crop to Latin America. The cacao
plant is really cool.
Yeah. When you're looking at these things, it's immediately showing you the emphasis that was put on the land and what that land was worth. Haiti was called the Pearl of the Antilles because at one point it is the most lucrative colony in the world. But, who is working that land?
I assume the colonists were all just getting their hands dirty, right?
Within their breeches.
Yeah. Are you sure it wasn't trousers?
In their fancy pants, yeah. Exactly. I'm not sure, actually. Maybe we can discuss at some point.
You're right. When we have 0 listeners left.
Yeah. But the original inhabitants of Hispaniola were the Tano people. And we had discussed this in one of our previous episodes, but, they are subject to foreign diseases and horrific working conditions, and the population declines really rapidly. But to keep up with the demands of the export economy, enslaved people are brought over. So this is going to start the Atlantic wing of the slave trade, if you will. But when enslaved people were brought from various parts of Western Africa, this whole exchange is called the Columbian Exchange. We see people, diseases, ideas, and then what we'll talk about in a minute, foods and plants, all part of this Columbian Exchange that we call it now. Coffee's origins come from Ethiopia. Sugar is brought to Haiti by Columbus on his second voyage. Like I said, cacao, the chocolate bean, is going to get sent to Europe. The natives in Latin America actually showed Europeans how to use the cacao bean, like how to make hot chocolate, like their version of hot chocolate.
Like, this is just a useless bean. Don't try and just eat it.
Like it's this. Have you ever seen one? It's like slimy, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
There's no way in that. Yeah. So the indigenous Tano people, what they ate was yucca, cassava. So these are like root plants. Whatever tapioca is, whatever that plant that is. They were.
I actually looked it up, and it was the cassava plant.
Oh, well, cassava slash tapioca.
Yeah. It had like another name, but it was from like the root of the cassava plant, which is
Oh, all
mostly
right.
root, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like hardier, right? It's a hard plant overall.
Hmm.
When enslaved African people were brought to the Caribbean by slave traders, those enslaved personnel brought with them, they would smuggle various seeds from their hometowns. And it's through oral histories reported to have been stowed in cornrows, so in braids in their hair. So it's typically the women would smuggle in, native seeds to what they were growing up with.
Such a
Yeah.
it's just an ingenious way to do that, and it's just the foresight to even
Mhm.
think to do that. You're
Yeah.
being kidnapped and taken from your home,
Hmm.
thrown naked onto a ship
Yep.
to
When they've
travel
already
that you
grown their
don't
hair.
know
Yeah.
where, and you're like, I'm going to store this stuff in my hair for when I get away.
Yeah.
You're like, it's like that's
I'm gonna
I don't
send
know, but just the fighting spirit in that is just really cool to me.
and then, there's more to cornrows. There would end up becoming maps. Like if somebody knew a way to escape or there was a planned escape route, they would they would braid that map into somebody's hair.
God,
It was
that's just
I know.
that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another article and a book, I believe, how rice ends up getting to South Carolina. It's via the same methods. The documentation is just more robust in the South Carolina case. So
Gotcha.
it's actually
That's
used yeah, it's actually
so
used as, like, "Hey, this we can see this pattern happening in this location. It probably started in these other locations also." So using some,
right,
assumptions there, but tying it to, like, other things like oral histories
man. That's so cool.
and myths and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty neat, yeah. As neat as it can be for that stuff.
Right, right. For in
Yeah.
context, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, they enslaved women would have these seeds in their hair, right? So that wherever they end up in a safe location, they can kind of start over with foods that were from their hometowns that would
Hmm.
sustain them. And one of those foods that ends up over in the Caribbean is rice. So that I thought was a really neat, rice has some literal roots that start at the
Yeah.
beginning. So it's been, farmed for over 200 years. When I read the US is the biggest importer of rice and Haiti is really needs US imports, I was like, what happened? So
Why?
that's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
How'd we get there?
yeah, yeah. But then that kind of gets us there. So you want to kind of lead us through post revolt,
Yeah.
slave revolt?
So Haiti is a slave country for a long time,
300 years.
301 years, which is
Yeah. Sad.
crazy.
Yeah.
It really is. During the revolution, and we mentioned this in the first Haiti episode, when Toussaint Louverture and his slave revolution were happening, they were of the mindset that we might not win. So
Mhm.
rather than just if we do lose, rather than just going back and continuing to work on these plantations, these farms, etc., let's burn it
Yeah.
so that no matter what, when this is over, we are not slaves anymore. Like there, we have nothing to work.
Right.
So they burn 99% of the means of production of goods, like the plantations, the
Mhm.
buildings, the farms.
Yep.
They just burned everything. It was very much a scorched earth campaign
Right. Right.
because they were slaves. They weren't thinking like hey guys, when we win, we need to make sure we have this to build our economic capabilities. They were
Well,
thinking we don't want to be slaves anymore,
like you were
and
saying,
we're not going to be.
there's a chance we might not win this, and there is no
Exactly.
way that we're going back to what we were just fighting to get away from. Yeah.
Exactly. Afterwards, when they were successful, they didn't have that very valuable farmland to farm anymore. I mean, they did, but it takes a lot of time for it to come back after being, completely scorched, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
they're kind of starting off on very difficult footing.
Yeah.
And it didn't help them at all that they were shunned by the international community because obviously France was like, this was our colony, you took it, we're not very happy with you. France had helped out the United States during the American Revolution, so the US backed them. Britain had actually tried to come back in and take the colony from the French during the revolution, the Haitian slave
Mhm.
revolution, and like 20,000 of their soldiers ended up dying of yellow fever, so they were also not huge fans
Yeah.
of the country, and people just sick of it and didn't want it, and so the entire international community was kind of just not paying any heed to Haiti, so they were left all on their own despite being a 100% export economy at the time.
Yeah. Remember too, they were like, if you're not black, we're gonna kill you or exile you.
Exactly.
So
So
to be
anybody who
a white
didn't fit that
international student,
description
no, thank you.
left. Yeah, and
Yeah,
was like, no, we're not dealing with that.
yeah,
This new country was not able to enjoy what had previously been, the luxuries of their country.
really rough start. Yeah, and it
They
doesn't
did.
really get better. And
No, it
then,
really doesn't.
so one thing that comes out of that, Haiti is forced via gunboat to accept this massive debt. And when we
Hmm.
started looking into the debt, we learned about that the U.S. occupied Haiti for like
Hmm.
a couple of decades from
Yep.
1915 to 1934.
1804 was when Haiti declares their independence, becomes its own country. And it wasn't that long after that France comes by with their gunboats
Yeah,
and hands them this
1820.
massive debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't even a country for a full 20 years,
Hmm.
and they're already saddled with this massive debt. So when they do start to recuperate, are able to farm and sell things, pretty much all that money is going out to pay this debt to France,
Yep.
which they have to pay because they don't have the capability. If France or any outside power really wanted to fight them via war powers
Yeah.
or whatever, they don't really have the capabilities to do anything about it.
Right.
So they don't start off on good footing at all. They're burdened by this massive debt, and then anything that they do farm in is going back out of the country. So it's not going to make the country a better place, right?
That's right. It's
And
not going to
then
like support infrastructure or anything like that.
1915, the United States occupation happens. And again, if you want more information on all this stuff, just listen to our previous episodes where we cover all this more in depth. We're going to try not to talk too much about all the nitty gritty here. We're just trying to stick with the agricultural side of things.
Hmm.
During the U.S. occupation, they come in, they start working on infrastructure and everything like that. But I think one of the biggest things to happen here during this time period, 1915 through 1934, on the behest of Citibank,
Hmm.
or was at the time the National City Bank of New York,
Yep.
the United States Marines forced the Haitian government to write a new constitution. And one of the biggest things in this new constitution is that international companies and buyers are now allowed to purchase land in Haiti, which, according to their previous constitution, was not allowed. Because, as we
Which,
said,
yeah.
Haitians did not care for outsiders. They told, the whole, like, if you're not black, get out of the country. Like, it was a very much, this is for Haiti and Haitians. If
Yeah.
you're not of that persuasion, get out. So they were forced to write this new constitution where international companies could come in. And that leads to companies like the Haitian American Sugar Company, which bought up tons of prime land for sugar, employed a ton of Haitians, but paid them dirt,
Yeah.
like literally paid them almost like nothing. Even shareholders were bragging about how much less they could pay Haitians than Cubans in like
Hmm.
their meetings in New York and stuff like that. So that
Yeah.
ends up with a large migration of Haitians leaving Haiti to disperse through the rest of the Americas and everything like that.
It's, this time period that we're talking about, it covers also like the banana wars. This is
Hmm.
not a individual story. It's not just Haiti experiences, but a lot of areas of Latin America, especially Central America, foreign entities are buying up land, the best land,
Yeah,
to grow and export and then ship that out
right.
and paying the
And
local
it's yeah, I
wages.
mean, and it's very tough for the
Yeah.
locals
Yep.
because like once again, the land is producing an excellent
Mhm.
product, but they're not able to benefit off of it. It's
Correct. They
being
don't own it. Yeah.
the Americans who own the Haitian American Sugar Company are making a ton of money. The on behest of like the Tabasco heir that we talked about in the other episode, who
Yeah.
just hangs out on his pineapple plantation
Right.
in Louisiana and profits. But
Yeah.
after that time period, that brings us to post U.S. occupation. Things are kind of getting back to normal, quote unquote normal for Haiti. They pay off the massive debt, which went from France to the U.S. They pay that off in 47,
Yep.
1947, and shortly afterwards, they elect Francois Papadoc Duvalier,
The
and
voodoo
the
priest.
voodoo physician.
Doctor.
Yeah, he's a definitely an interesting character, and if you look more into him, the way he gets elected is kind of crazy, but we're not going to talk about that. We
That's
talked
episode
plenty about
3.
him last episode. Yeah. So Papa Doc becomes this dictator, and
Prez for
he's
life.
yeah, Prez for life. He dies suddenly,
Mhm.
and his son Baby Doc takes over at 19.
And in 1978, the African swine fever is circulating through various parts of the Caribbean. The Haitian government is pressured by the USDA, so the United States Department of Agriculture, to begin eradicating all of the country's Creole pigs in an effort to protect the pork industry from this swine fever.
Right.
These Creole pigs are prized possessions. They're indigenous
Yeah.
to the island. They're the way that the peasant class can, one, not only feed themselves, but they will sell these so that their kids can go to school.
Right. I saw it was also they would sell or slaughter the pigs to pay for marriages,
Yep.
like
Yeah, like a
medical
dowry. Yep.
emergencies, some voodoo ceremonies.
Yeah, so they're
Super
very
important to the
important.
culture.
Yep, to this like lower class. Um, but they are decimated. Like right, the Creole pigs are taken out and they are considered extinct in 1983, so just like 5 years later. What happens though, which we thought was interesting, is that, the USDA strikes a bargain where, you kill these pigs because we don't want this swine fever to continue, and we will supplement your pig industry with imports from the US. But those pigs, the US pigs, were just too soft. They couldn't sustain in the weather or the climate, and they end up needing super expensive pens to try to make them comfortable, and they end
Mm.
up all dying. The pigs die, and Haiti's pork industry collapses. It's just another example of Haitians now becoming consumers versus producers, and as a result of it, millions are on the brink of starvation because of it.
And this is just one of those Murphy's Law things.
Yep.
They did nothing wrong. It's just swine flu ends up getting into the Dominican Republic, coming over because
Yeah.
they share that border. The USDA, you can think understandably,
Hmm.
doesn't want swine flu coming in to like infected pork coming to America. I think the measures they went to were a little bit extreme there.
Yeah. So in
Just like,
'83, they're extinct. The pigs are extinct.
and after that, this is just they're still baby Doc running the country, and people are getting more and more upset with him. In '83, like you said, the pigs are extinct, and Pope John Paul II actually visits Haiti in March. And in a speech in Port-au-Prince, he just straight up says, something must change here. And he calls for equitable distribution of income and a more egalitarian social and political structure, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But revitalized by that, a bunch of revolts started breaking out. And revolts and riots, they started in the city of Gonaives. And one of the big things to come out of these revolts was crowds attacking food distribution centers.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like you said, due to the pork industry just falling, people are on the brink of starvation. And this is like in Gonaives, they start attacking the food distribution centers, and that starts to spread kind of all throughout the country.
Yeah.
And this lasts for like 2 years, where people are having these demonstrations, raiding food distribution warehouses, all that other stuff.
I feel like it would be interesting if you could hear what was going on at that time period. If they were like, the Pope told me to do this.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, I mean, it
Taking the
says,
wheel.
from what I was reading, it was revolts broke out and were revitalized by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and
So it's like,
again, similar to other areas of Latin America, the Catholic Church holds a lot of power.
it does,
Yeah.
even though Papa Doc was this voodoo guy, right? So I think it's this war of ideas here, where it's the Catholic Church versus the local voodoo type thing going on here. And that's conversation for a whole nother day, but definitely interesting to look a little bit further into.
Yeah.
Baby Doc flees the country, and things are just rough all around. Like the Haitian American Sugar Company that we just previously talked about, they started back in the U.S. occupation, and 1987, they are actually forced to close down. And the reason they have to close down is due to smuggled refined sugar coming in from the Dominican Republic. And they just can't compete with the prices. The smuggled sugar sold for about $24 for 100 pounds of sugar.
Jeez.
Comparing with $27 for Haitian sugar, $3 tax. So, $6 cheaper for, I don't know who needs 100 pounds of sugar, but it's a lot cheaper. Yeah, right? They got coffee and chocolate they got to sell.
You gotta cake
But
the cake.
this, like, I don't want to understate how big this was, because it's estimated that every employed Haitian supports at least 6 people.
Mhm.
And the sugar company closing would have affected as many as 300,000 people.
Jeez.
So that times 6 is a lot.
Oh my god.
There's a quote from a New York Times article on April 12th, 1987. Workers were bitter about the closing. We're dead, and it's the government that's causing us to die, said Lucien Felix, 34-year-old, who
Wow.
has 5 dependents. Like, it doesn't get more cut and dry than that. Like,
Mm.
they're upset, understandably. Things are kind of dire. And then that's when, like, we kind of leave off before we get back to some economic reform that really impacts Haiti.
The irony of it too, like an American company being shut down because an imported sugar is cheaper
Right.
is interesting. Yeah, it's something. It's noteworthy.
It definitely is. And you'll
Yeah.
understand that more in a second.
Yeah, I know. So that company shutting down was 1987. We're going to take us into the Clinton era, so the 90s, and we're going to focus on rice specifically for this time period because it's just a perfect example. So, rice is a staple food for Haitians, like I mentioned. It's been farmed for over 200 years. As we mentioned in previous podcasts, Haiti had a robust domestic market and were self sustaining until the 1990s, until these economic reforms brought in from negotiations with the Clinton administration and things like the Caribbean Basin Initiative. They are looking at these policies are slashing the tariffs on rice imports as one example. And rice goes from having a 35% tariff on imports down to 3%, and it becomes the lowest in the Caribbean at the time. The result of that tariff, as we mentioned in another podcast, is twofold. So, one, this opens up the market for cheaper international imports, and the main importer is the United States. And while this is good for the consumer because they can buy this necessity at a much cheaper price, it kills the Haitian domestic rice market. And then the trickle effects of that, similar to the sugar company, anybody
Hmm.
associated with the rice market is now SOL, right? When I looked up who is importing the rice from America, and honestly, to be totally transparent, I was trying to link China, like a American company, but was bought by China, which I haven't found yet. So I did go into my research with a bit of a bias, but I found that the American rice industry, a Texas based industry, is in control of 90% of the imports that go into Haiti.
And just to
So,
clarify, that's the
yeah,
name of the company, American Rice
correct.
Industries.
Correct. That is the name of the company. I'm not being like generalized. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a big, it's, if you just hear it, it's like,
True. No, it's a good
okay,
point.
you going to tell me the name?
Duh. As you said. Right. But the company, American Rice Industries, rice in the US in the 70s had big international markets in Asia specifically. But those areas kind of dried up in the 80s. South Korea, as an example, was able to grow its own domestic rice enough that it doesn't need US imports. And they are freeing themselves from that dependence.
Mhm.
Thailand developed a cheaper way to cultivate and harvest rice, making their product much cheaper than the US's. So Asian markets tended towards like Thailand rice. And
Mhm.
quoted in the newspapers, I've got one from 1986. U.S. growers were saying they were taking a beating in the world markets, those rice
Mhm.
growers.
Mhm.
This company, American Rice Industries, the one, again, that holds that monopoly in Haiti, lobbied Congress. And in our notes, I bolded, like, oh, we haven't seen this before. They lobby Congress looking for subsidies so that they can sell rice globally at a deeply discounted rate. And Congress passes a bill, the 1986 Farm Bill, where the business could sell rice for an example price like $250 per ton, but it cost them $500 per ton to produce. And the government made up the difference in subsidies.
That's
So,
just wild.
isn't that? So in 86, that same year that the Farm Bill is passed, the company American Rice Industries makes a huge new, like, multi-million dollar plant in Freeport, Texas. And they make it there specifically so that they can have a deep water port to focus on international shipping. And here's where I was like, oh, this is Haiti. This is where it happens. But no, they go to Saudi Arabia. And even to
Hmm.
today, Saudi Arabia is one of their biggest international markets.
I guess that makes sense because, like, if you look at Saudi Arabia, you're not
Yeah.
like, I bet they grow great rice.
But they're also, diversifying where their foodstuffs come from. So are they smart or are they more fragile because they depend on international imports, but they're taking them from different areas of the world? So, when we're looking at fragile food systems, should we look at Saudi Arabia as like example, or should we look at Saudi Arabia as like a lesson learned? And I think that's a debate that changes every day.
I think so. 'Cause we did talk about that region a bit when we
Mhm.
talked about the wheat being shut
Yeah.
out from
Yep.
the um, the Black Sea.
Yeah. So it's not a one off.
Hmm.
Also in 1986, AFI and the rice industry were pushing for the U.S. to place trade sanctions against Japan because Japan had refused to import rice from the U.S. It made me think of the British and the Opium Wars, where China was saying, "We don't want any of your drugs. Get out of here, British." And then they fought a war over it. So it's kind
Right.
of similar in terms of like economic warfare, where the U.S. was like, "We're going to trade sanction you if you don't let us import our rice."
If you don't buy our rice.
No, I'm going to slap sanctions on you. But anyway,
Mm.
so the American rice industry, again, the monopoly holder, grew their Caribbean market, and they end up holding 90% share of the rice market for Haiti. A couple of weeks ago, there was an article that stated that the rice being imported to Haiti was tested to have double the amount of arsenic than like the U.S. standard rice.
Mhm.
But we do want to point out, we checked yesterday, or the day before now. That article was voluntarily rescinded, citing that some of that data may have been skewed. Which good, right? Good that somebody's going back and
Yeah.
checking it. We're not just taking things at face value.
Yes.
And good that somebody's looking at their data and being like, okay, I could see where this was misconstrued. That's great.
Exactly. So we'll
But,
ourselves will be probably keeping an eye on that, but we probably won't be providing any updates because I think we're going to close the book on Haiti here. But
yeah. So I just
it
wanted to,
is
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, no, that they wrote this scholarly article and then published it from out of the University of Michigan, and they
yeah,
voluntarily took it back when they got some feedback and were like, "Oh,
yeah.
we may have gotten some information that changes things." So
Or we could
props to
see
them.
how, yeah, we could see how looking at this data through a different lens leads to a different result. But that's kind of the article that started our trip into Haiti's history. So just an update on where they were at. But when I was looking at, I thought there was a new movement to grow the domestic rice market in Haiti. And when I looked at that, there are some new rice movements. As we talked about in our last episode, and I'm sure, if you haven't listened, violence is widespread. Gangs
Mhm.
own the city. There's a lot of people on the verge of starvation, and a lot of people that would rather not join the gangs.
Yeah.
And I was looking at what's going on, and there have been pop up rice stands, and they're controlled by men. And typically in Haiti, that would be a women's role to be a street food vendor. But
Hmm.
men have been doing these pop up stands where they have a wheelbarrow and a giant like cooking pot and rice. And they're literally just making like rice bowls on the side of the road, and they've become pretty popular.
Pretty cool.
And they note, and they noted in the article that I linked, again, they are supporting 5, 6 people, but they've had other men join in as well and say that this is a better alternative. They'd rather be on the street every day selling rice than being part of the gang.
Right, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So good for them. Props to
Yeah.
them for again. You see that just that spirit of not giving in
Yeah. Yeah.
to just everything that goes wrong.
Like natural
Um,
disasters.
just gonna say that brings us to another thing that goes wrong during just all of Haiti's history. Essentially, there have been natural disasters. I mean, just hundreds of years. Haiti's just in a spot in the Caribbean that's just constantly being buffeted by hurricanes, tropical storms, massive earthquakes,
Mhm.
droughts, floods, mudslides. Even just from 2010 to 2012, they lost hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, 300,000 to an earthquake.
Yep.
There were multiple hurricanes and tropical storms that came through,
Mhm.
or which led to, which is weird to say, but also droughts and floods, like
Yeah.
all everything. And then they also had to cut down trees to make charcoal, which led to just degrading the environment even more. So it was harder to grow things. USAID came in with the World Food Program and tried to introduce different farming techniques and greenhouses and vertical farming and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
it's just thing after thing after thing. The country is just being when these natural disasters come in. It's not just people and buildings that are affected. These entire crops are wiped out for an entire year's worth of production. The timing of these events couldn't be worse. Not that there's ever a good time for
Seriously.
natural disasters, but they tend to happen when it's almost time to harvest.
Mhm.
And
No,
so they
that's true, right.
lose everything. And
Yeah.
so there's just nothing for them to do. And then the land is torn up, so they can't even plant for the next season.
Yeah.
And
It takes
it's a
years, if
history
not
of this
decades.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
imagine if you had a farm and you were about to go harvest everything and sell it to make money for your next year. And you go out and realize, oh, shoot, a storm just took everything away. I have
Mhm.
nothing. And I also can't plant on this for the next couple of years because I have to work on repairing it. I mean, that's what happened, but
Yeah.
at a countrywide scale.
That makes me think too of, linking it to our Ukrainian discussion where there's these ripple effects. Like there's a moment in time, like a hurricane, and it wipes out
Mhm.
field or whatever. But it's not like the next day they're ready to go, right?
Yeah.
They sweep away the debris and now they can start again. It's years. The ripple effects of these things will take years, if not decades, to
Yeah.
fully bounce back. Same like Ukraine and the stuff with the wheat and the conflict. Same with
Yep.
Haiti and these natural disasters, which is why
And the hard thing. Sorry, go ahead.
these international aid programs are trying to come in and show different techniques. Like vertical farming is supposed to take less water, so if there is a drought, maybe this will help get them through that drought period. And there's been efforts to restart that domestic rice industry, but currently, as of yesterday, domestic rice is still at least 20% higher in price than imported rice. So even though it's growing, nobody can
Got a
really
ways
buy
to
it
go.
yet. Yeah, nobody's
Yeah.
really buying it yet. So,
So, I mean, I
but
think all this, like we were saying,
mhm,
well, like I was saying to you before we started recording, was
yeah,
just, I think all this just speaks to the resiliency of like the Haitian farmers.
yeah,
I probably would have just given up after everything that went on. And then one of the hard things too, like with Ukraine, like when this is all done, like sure they'll get international aid and everything, but
hmm,
at that point they'll probably have a functioning government. With Haiti, this is all happening without any real government. Like
very true.
it's just there's no lead to be like, okay, I see that we've had all these hurricanes. Here's the policy we're going to all get behind to revamp the country and rebuild our industry and get going. There's
That's
never
true.
been anyone really in charge for long enough to be like, all right, here we go. Here's a policy. This is how we're all going to help out, etc.
But I do think, just to end on that note, where despite all of that, the Haitians are continuing to try.
It's it should be applauded
Yeah,
in
yeah,
my view. Like it's truly impressive, just the resiliency and the spirit of these people to just continue and keep trying despite everything that happens. Like it's their home, when whether you like it or not. It's the circumstances they've been forced to deal with are out of their control. They just
yeah.
have to keep going. So
Mm,
it's a very very interesting history. I've never really studied a country quite like Haiti in any facet, whether it's government, the agricultural aspects of it, all of it, just
mhm.
how they live, how they've grown, how the country has come to be where it is. It's remarkable in so many ways.
And I've learned quite a bit, so I'm glad that we did this 4 series
Yeah, me
episode.
too. I mean, it all came out of an article that has been rescinded, but I hope everybody has learned a little bit. I know I have.
But that
It's
knowledge will
been
never recede. Yeah.
exactly like we never would have looked into it if it wasn't for
Yeah.
that one article. So
Yeah.
whether or not that they end up reissuing it with some changes or not, I've learned a ton of interesting history. I am going to be posting in a little bit just some books that we found that look
Mhm.
to be more interesting if you're really interested in diving into Haitian history during certain time periods or just as a whole. If you thought these 4 podcast episodes were a lot, get ready. Because full on tomes on Haitian history is
Yeah.
probably a little bit more than you're looking for, but I will try to post some books that I find it interesting on. Well, we will on the topics that
Yeah.
we talk about for the Farms and Frontlines quote unquote book club. So keep an
Yeah.
eye out for
Good
that.
stuff.
Yeah, that ends our series on Haiti, and this has been our longest series by double the amount
Mhm.
of episodes. But like we said, we tried to keep each episode as succinct and clear as possible. So we'll see how the format looks going forward. But if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to us at farmsandfrontlines@gmail.com. Follow us on our social medias on Instagram and Threads. It's at Farms and Frontlines. That's currently all we have. Working on some other things, but we'll keep you updated in the future. Thank you so much for listening. Please tell a friend if you enjoyed it. The word of mouth really helps us to grow, and we're just doing it because we love doing it and hope everybody's learning along with us. So
Yeah.
that's about it for me. Jess, you have anything you want to plug?
Maybe you can put the more you know with the rainbow and the reading rainbow,
We're gonna LeVar Burton, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So next week, actually, Jess, you will be on vacation.
Going to Hershey Park. Yeah, I'm excited.
That's sounds really great. But we will have an episode with myself, and it will be our very first guest on the show. So tune in for that. Going to be a really great conversation about the future of clean, quote unquote, clean meats, meat replacements, what that looks like at a kind of political economic level. So should be a really interesting conversation.
I look forward to listening to it.
I imagine Hershey Park's probably a little bit more fun, but you know. Well, thanks again, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll continue listening.
Talk to you later.